Welcome to the Neurostimulation Podcast. I'm Michael Passmore, Clinical Associate Professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. The Neurostimulation Podcast is all about exploring the fascinating world of clinical neuroscience, non-invasive neurostimulation, interventional mental health techniques like ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, a whole host of things that can be done to help improve lives and connections. We explore the latest research breakthroughs and how that research is being translated into real-world treatments that can improve health and well-being. This podcast is separate from my clinical and academic roles and is part of my personal effort to bring this kind of neuroscience education to the general public. Accordingly, I would like to emphasize that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical guidance. Today I had a really interesting discussion with Dr. Brian Desroches. Brian is a psychotherapist, a teacher, an author, an entrepreneur, a coach, just a really fascinating individual, and he presents a really compelling story, which is a really heartfelt and interesting and engaging discussion that I hope that you'll stay tuned for, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it. I certainly know that I did. It was a really interesting conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you all. Welcome back to the Neurostimulation Podcast, where we explore how cutting-edge neuroscience translates into real human change, not just symptom management, but real transformation. I'm really excited about today's conversation because it sits right at the intersection of neuroscience, psychotherapy, and lived experience. My guest today is Dr. Brian Desroches, a psychotherapist with over 3 decades of clinical experience, an author, and a consultant to healthcare professionals. Brian has spent much of his career doing what many of us try to do, helping people understand why they keep getting stuck in patterns that they desperately want to change. But in 2015, after more than 20 years of practice, Brian had a moment that fundamentally changed his understanding of emotional healing. He realized that much of what we've been taught about things like coping, managing triggers, and even insight itself was incomplete. And that realization led him into the neuroscience of emotional learning and memory reconsolidation, and ultimately to his new book called Living a Trigger-Free Life. So I'm really excited because I think in this conversation, we're going to be exploring why willpower collapses under pressure, why insight often doesn't lead to change, how the brain predicts future pain based on past emotional learning, and most importantly, how those learnings can actually be updated at the synaptic level. Brian doesn't frame self-sabotage as a flaw, but as a protection, and he offers a neuroscience-based pathway for lasting change that many listeners, especially clinicians, may find both unsettling and deeply hopeful. Brian, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this opportunity to spread this word and to discuss what I think is a paradigm shift for my profession and for the self-help industry too. A real switch from the overcome, battle, get over it, counteract your symptoms to one where, in the Buddhist sense, you engage with them and find out what's really driving them underneath. And now the new neuroscience tells us how we can change the cause of those symptoms and problems that last year brought about 34 million people to psychotherapy.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that it really speaks to the importance of bringing, or at least having space to allow for some type of a spiritual component to any kind of therapeutic work. You know, you mentioned Buddhism, but despite, regardless of what anyone's worldview is, I think that it's a really important aspect of care. And it's something that in secular society is often sidelined. And so I'm really looking forward to exploring how important that is from your perspective.
Yes, thank you. And I'll get to that. Yes, and it has to do, in fact, with emotional learning. But that's a different topic, but related. So,
for sure, yeah, the emotional piece and the spiritual piece definitely go hand in hand. I was curious, so maybe if you don't mind, perhaps you could just introduce yourself a little bit about your background, just so viewers and listeners know you a bit, and that would be great. Yeah.
Good. Well, I started my career, got a master's degree in hospital administration, and by my late 20s, I just saw, boy, I just wanted to make a lot of money, and those people that have those big offices in those hospitals were doing okay. So I thought, hey, I'm going to do this. And so I went ahead and did that. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I was vice president of a multi-hospital corporation. I got a master's degree in counseling because we were managing healthcare facilities and recovery facilities, addiction recovery. And I did not understand what those people were talking about. It just defied my understanding. So I figured, well, if you can't change them, why not join them? So I got a master's degree in counseling. But after a bit, I got kind of tired. My administration work did not feed my soul. And so I decided to make a trail, left that completely, got involved building some psychiatric hospitals, headed up a alcoholism treatment center for about a year. It still didn't do it. And in my mid 30s, I kind of said, that's it. I opened up a private practice, cast my fate to the wind, if you will, and it was the best choice I've ever made in my life. I know it was my destiny. I just know it. And it continues to be. And so been in practice 30 plus years, I have a coaching practice that works with dentists, literally all over the world, workshops, presentations, and how to deal with difficult patients and how to lead a very complex organization, a dental practice. And that's been a very rewarding for me because dentists are, like you, scientists. And I have to really know my science, my neural. I really have to know it in order to be able to do what I did. The coaching practice and also do psychotherapy. Using the model that I described in the book, I just ain't going back to anything else. I see too many positive results. So, father of 2 kids, 2 adopted children, and live in Seattle. And I love it. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much. It's such a fascinating story. It's so heartwarming. I love the description of just how you felt at home, just so connected when you found your vocation, and that you just really flourished in that ever since. It's lovely.
Yes. And that's why because of the work I was doing, I went and got a PhD in pastoral counseling and psychology. I really wanted to understand more deeply what people were asking fundamentally about meaning and purpose and suffering. And that helped me to really just deepen my awareness of the deeper journey that every one of us, I believe, is on. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that it just sounds amazing. And in particular, I just think that it's really interesting to hear about your coaching, because the coaching, it lends itself so well to the psychotherapeutic practice, because that's essentially what a psychotherapist is, isn't it? It's a type of a coach.
Very much so. Very, very much so. Yeah. The only difference is when you coach, you don't have to put a diagnosis. When you do psychotherapy, you need a diagnosis, and that's the primary. But the process of helping people to understand and move towards their desired outcomes is very similar in many ways. Yeah,
it's interesting though, because the diagnostic piece, it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one hand it can be helpful, but on the other hand it can hinder and get in the way.
You have this, and so there's this, I've got to fix this, which is typically the problem or the symptom, and does not get underneath that problem or symptom at what's really driving it. What I've learned is the emotional learning that's driving that symptom
Mm.
that the brain in its learning, predicting, and adapting process recognizes. And then, boy, we focus on these problems. But beneath, I think Freud would be quite happy
Sure.
with what neuroscience has found out. I'm not quite talking about the sexual repression, but the fact of and Jung particularly,
Yeah.
the role of the unconscious,
Mm.
how we can bring it to consciousness,
Yeah.
and actually change at the synaptic level in the brains still is a fact and a reality that, as I say, I'm continuing to integrate into
Yeah,
the practice of my life.
that's great. Yeah, it makes me think of a really apt metaphor that I read recently in Stan and Christina Groff's book on holotropic healing.
Yes.
And the metaphor was that when you have a red light on the dashboard of your car, signaling that there's some engine trouble, you don't just reach under into the dashboard and pull out the wires that go to that red light, right? Which is, in a way, that's kind of what modern psychiatry does with these medications, is it seeks to just dampen down the alert signal rather than going into the engine and fixing what's causing the problem in the first place.
Well said. I also have a car analogy too. It's like when you get in your car, you start the ignition and you've got a destination in mind. And you want to go to this, whatever it is, party or the grocery store or something. You put your foot on the gas. Now imagine when you put your foot on the gas, you simultaneously put your other foot on the brake.
Mhm.
This is the dilemma. And what you're saying is, okay, so we're going to focus on what do you do when the foot's on the brake? Let's relieve maybe you need a different destination. Maybe you need to get out of the car. Maybe you need to back off a little bit. But we don't look at what causes the other foot to put the foot on the brake. And that's very stressful, as you know very well, on the nervous system, on the inflammation. It's very stressful to have one foot on this. You burn out your engine. Burn out your engine. Yeah.
All these little subtle ways that we get in our own way. We are our own kinds of obstacles. These subtle methods that we get in our own way.
Yeah.
I was curious. Yeah, go ahead.
I've learned a lot that I get in my own way, but now I find out that many times getting in my own way is my brain's way of protecting me from something that will be painful, will involve suffering, that I only feel, but I don't have images. It's not like an explicit traumatic memory. And I certainly have those. And EMDR has been very effective at metabolizing those explicit memories. But when it comes to the implicit emotional learnings acquired in the first 7 years, we only know those as sensations. Very seldom is there anything explicit, semantic, or episodic associated with that. And those are what drive my observation, my experience, those are what drive our emotional reactions, our triggered reactions, our pattern maladaptive, whether it be pushing away as in conflict, pulling away as in avoidance, or just total avoidance, fight, fawn, that's what the cause is. And that's a big shift. That, as I say, I'm still integrating that because I want to fix. And no. Listen and go deeper.
Yeah, it makes me think that maybe what I was really interested in just reading a bit about your background was this idea of the awakening was it 2015? That there was like a paradigm shifting moment. Maybe you can explain what that was about. Yeah.
Sure. So in the mid 1990s, I published 2 books, one on Reclaiming Yourself and the other a Codependent Recovery Process. And the other was called Your Boss Is Not Your Mother, How We Repeat Patterns in the Workplace Based on Our Family Experience. And they were published by big publishing houses in New York. But the one book, Your Boss Is Not Your Mother, when I submitted the manuscript, the publisher said, love the content, but it needs to be formatted. It's just, we're going to hire a professional writer to do that. And their logic, their rationale made total sense to me. They did it very respectfully. They wanted the best for the book. My experience of the rewrite was shame, and they never intended this, inadequacy, what's wrong with me, I'm not enough. I really got, looking back now, I really saw that. Got the book rewritten, it was translated into 6 languages, and I'm feel really good about it. So in the about 5 years later, the early 2000s, mid 2004, I had an idea for 2 more books. And I thought, oh, I've got 2, I can do this. Michael, I couldn't write. Even now when I talk about it, I can feel that experience, not the anxiety, but the awareness. I couldn't write. I'd get frozen, and it made no sense. So I've got a writing coach. I bought a really nice, fine blue cobalt pen to write with. I got a new computer. I went on writing retreats. I did EMDR. Nothing would move me beyond this, what became a very toxic procrastination for 10 years. And I couldn't understand it. And so in 2015, I read about this workshop on memory reconsolidation, and this sounds really interesting. I went to the workshop. It was at Fordham in New York, and as so happens, I was the guinea pig for the demonstration. And guess what the focus was? My writing procrastination. I went through the process. There's 5 steps that I talk about in the book. I didn't know that I'd shifted. When I got back Monday morning to Seattle, and I went, I said, I'm going to start writing. What was at an 8 level in terms of anxiety was now at a 1. And I was like, it was disorienting to me. It's like, what is going on? I'm supposed to be anxious. It was 10 years of that. I couldn't understand it. And then when I really started looking at what the research was and how my brain had changed over that weekend, because what the brain was predicting was going to happen if I write, which is shame, inadequacy, really toxic emotions, had been counteracted, if you will, not by trying to get over it, by a mismatch of prediction correction. Mm-hmm. And that just blew me away. And that's when I began my in-depth research of what is this? How does this work? What's the new? And the neuroscience is very clear on it. And so I started using this process, this non-counteractive. Let's engage with the symptom. Let's go underneath the symptom. If you imagine doing this change, what's it like? And for most people, they imagine doing a change or completing something. And I've got so many stories in the book that become anxious because the brain had learned, my brain had learned, if I write and publish another book, I will be shamed and humiliated and will suffer. And it had all its origins in my family of origin. I'm the adult child of an alcoholic, PTSD, dad from World War II. And I thought I'd done 17 years of therapy on all kinds of stuff. Nothing really changed, but at least I was doing something. Mm-hmm. Insight never worked. I knew what my problem was. I just couldn't do anything about it. But the writing really, really brought it home when I learned that writing and shame, those negative kind of emotions, have become associated in my brain unbeknownst to me. Mm-hmm. It was not like I said, oh, good, I get to learn that I'm incompetent and inadequate. No, my brain, my emotional brain linked those two. Mm-hmm. And so every time I went to write, my brain would assess the threat of the writing, because the brain's always doing a threat assessment. Mm-hmm. And then its survival bias would predict pain, activate the anxiety, and I'd withdraw. Mm-hmm. And when I really start to see that and work with clients and in my own life, I began to experience the kind of changes that I dreamt about having, but never and really experienced in my body. The shift was in my body. It wasn't just in my head. It was, I could feel the difference. And when you can feel the difference given a stimuli, and you have a different experience of that stimuli, your brain has changed. It is transformed. And that is an enduring transformation. Yeah, and that's what happened in 2015. It just like, wow.
The idea about prediction correction, I think that's such a fundamental, very important idea. And you've explained that already a little bit. Do you mind just expanding on that a little, and then
Not at
maybe
all.
about how to approach doing that problem?
Yeah, and in neuroscience terms, they call it a prediction error. So the brain's prediction is an error. I call it prediction correction because when I've been doing workshops on this, I got feedback saying, no, you're correcting the prediction. I realized there's something to be said for that wisdom. So I call it a prediction correction. But if you look it up, it's prediction error in neuroscience terms. So the brain is a learning, predicting, and adapting process. It does a lot of things, but at heart, it acquires knowledge about skills, knowledge about processes and information. But there's a third level of knowledge that the brain acquires that most of us aren't aware of because we don't actively, consciously participate in it. And that's the level of emotional learning. So the emotional brain acquires knowledge, what causes pain and what causes pleasure. And in the first 7 years, particularly, that process, as you know, is very powerful. As Jung talked about, the stamping process that happens, cultural process that happens, fitting in, all of that. That knowledge that is acquired, called an implicit emotional learning process, resides in the unconscious, the lower regions, levels of the right hemisphere, if you will. And so the brain it's a predictive process, as it uses its past experiences to predict. It's always doing that. We do it consciously. Planning for this was a prediction. We do this consciously. The brain also does it unconsciously. So if I learned, as I did with writing and shame and get connected, I didn't know that my brain learned that. So every time I would go to write, my brain would take the writing cue and it would activate, to make sense of this, activate the learning. The learning would then predict, because of its survival bias, it would predict pain. And naturally, it does what it's created to do evolution-wise. It would then create anxiety, the signal that says, no, no, no. And with that, the accompanied behavioral, even like, it was interesting that Dr. Henderson was talking about depression. I worked with many people where depression is their protective mechanism. And pills didn't do anything for them until they really, really looked at what is the threat if I do this. So a prediction correction is, first of all, you have to become conscious of the threat. If I do this, then this will happen to me. That's hard for people because the emotional brain is logical, but it's most often irrational. I've had people predict, if I voice my opinion to my family, they will oust me, they will ostracize me, and I will be like a little child left in the woods all alone. That's what it felt like. Now, to a 37 or 40-year-old man or woman, that makes no sense. It's irrational. But to the emotional brain, it's very logical. So as a result, they would then withdraw and not do anything, not say anything. That pattern would get reinforced. A prediction correction, when you're in an activated state, and you have to be in the activated state, you then bring in information that is a mismatch to the prediction, that counters the prediction, that in fact says, wait a minute, that prediction is not valid at all. Look at how many times I have expressed myself with my family. They didn't ostracize me. They didn't reject me. And when you pair, like Bluetooth, when you pair in this anxious state, which is the prediction state, with a information that the brain says, wait a minute, this doesn't match. And because of its survival, it has to update itself. So we get this activated neural network. When you bring in information that contradicts what that learning is that you've now made conscious, if this, then this, and then the brain deconsolidates, unwires that neural network. And that can stay open from up to about 5 hours, research has found, during which time you can continue the update. And then it reconsolidates with the new information as a result of the update. So the correction, the prediction correction, is very important. It can't just be affirmations. It has to be some lived experience or awareness. I've had people in sessions just like, oh my God, they just snapped out of a trance when they introduced a prediction correction to their brain, when they're activated. And that's the difference between this model or this approach versus standard psychotherapy, which would counteract, push against, develop an alternative neural network that competes with the one that is the symptom-causing one. This new approach is, no, you engage this, you go under it, make yourself conscious, introduce prediction correction information. I've had many people have I talk about spontaneous transformations. When you suddenly become aware, and I used it in my wife is a great chef, and every time she gave me feedback, you didn't cut the onion right or blah, 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 I would feel attacked. She's not attacking me, but I would like, and before I used to withdraw. Then I realized, what is my brain predicting that is causing me to withdraw and to kind of get resentful? Oh, that she's going to reject me because I'm not very good at it. That felt true. It feels true. Michael, here's the thing. When you touch into an emotional learning, it feels true. The emotional brain doesn't know time. Yeah. So you may have learned that 40 years ago, but when it gets activated today, it feels true today. But wait a minute, my wife's not going to are you kidding me? We've been married 38 years and I'm still learning how to be and now when it happens, I laugh. We kind of laugh about it. I say, oh, yeah. It's a scintilla of what it was before I learned this information. So prediction corrections are critical, and as a way of thinking, when you start to think this way, then I call it trigger-informed mindfulness. You become aware, whoa, that just triggered me. What is the threat that my brain is predicting? I'm with my friends. I'm having the golf game. I'm out to dinner. A friend's telling me about their vacation, and I'm having this reaction. What's going on in me? Yeah, it's, oh, yeah.
It strikes me that one of the key concepts I think that I extracted from that fascinating explanation was the notion of the importance of the embodied aspect of an emotional experience, right? Because even, and I think particularly maybe for clinicians, academics, people that tend to live in our minds and our cognition, the whole idea about being emotionally intelligent, it's probably only half the battle. You can be as emotionally intelligent in your head as you want, but exactly. if it's not an embodied experience, we're not taught anything about emotions and feelings as kids.
Nope.
For the most part, but even less so about how emotions are experienced in the body, right?
That is so accurate. And one of the things I've shared with parents who sometimes in presentations, they'll say, well, what do I do with my kid all they want to do is look at their phone. And we know research is clear that there's no vagal stimulation when you look at a phone. Your basically vagal neutral are shut down. And so because of that, what are they learning? What is the emotional learning that's happening when you're looking at a device? Where's the relational aspect, the interpersonal neurobiological aspect, of using Daniel Siegel's term, is missing. Yeah, and I've worked with many parents who have reactivity, a lot of reaction with their kids do certain things. I'm thinking of a gentleman this last week. We went into what your kid's doing, what your kid does. Let's go into you. What do you want to be different? I want to be calm and present. Okay, so what is the threat of being calm and present? And what he discovered was that if my child is acting out, people will see me as a parent who doesn't care, as an incompetent person. And I will feel the shame of that. That goes back to a lot of his history. And so when he realized that, he was able to introduce prediction corrections so that, and I'll be seeing him next week, but we got really, let's take a look at that. Are people really going to do that? No, especially when you're just with your son and nobody's in the house. It's
Right.
just, but it generalized it. And so these triggers that we all experience are when they become patterns.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to that last story. I think this has been a therapeutic section of the conversation for me, for sure. I feel like I'm getting a bonus here because I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, right? Because I think that, again, for a long time, it seems that emotional memory, to a certain extent, as you referenced the greats, in terms of this idea that we were born as a tabula rasa, blank slate, and then we have emotional memory that's kind of stamped in and hardwired. But then it seems that more recently, neuroscience is discovering concepts like memory reconsolidation. So maybe as it relates to your work, can you explain a little bit about this idea about memory reconsolidation in terms of emotional memories and why it represents such a radical departure from the legacy symptom management approach?
Yeah. My original training in psychotherapy was the counteract. Let's battle these symptoms, overcome them. And then if you can't, then here's the relaxation techniques to soothe yourself afterwards. So you had two approaches. One, push against it. The other, okay, soothe yourself when it doesn't happen. And get insight. And my experience with insight is insights never change anything. It's right. In fact, many times it made me more frustrated because I had insight and I thought, but I'm not changing. I'm still reacting. There must be something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not getting it. I would become critical of myself. And I know many people that do. With this new motif, if you will, this paradigm that's emerging is instead of overcoming, we engage in. We, as a therapist, we listen and try to feed back. And in doing that, and people can do this for themselves, which is wonderful, is go deeper. You can go underneath techniques such as focusing, or I suggest people that use a phone recorder to record what happens when you get into the embodied experience of anxiety. Now, understandably, there's people that experience very significant trauma that they need to be very careful, and I have those caveats in the book. But for the vast majority of us, it's little t traumas that generate the patterns. And so once that becomes a neural network, an emotional learning that correlates experience, something happened, with desire or something. Hey, mommy, I want your attention. Of course. And you go up and you grab mommy. Oh, okay. And mommy turns and mommy's busy. And this is not about mommy. This is about what I learned. Okay. I made mommy upset. I'm responsible for mommy's feelings, which is, and as we know for children, is part of their survival. Is my life did, not consciously, but as young mammals. So we adapt. We have to adapt. And Wordsworth has a wonderful way of describing that. May I read you the first part of his poem?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
This is from Ode to Intimations of Immortality, from his Recollections of Childhood. And it says at the very beginning, our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life star, has elsewhere its setting. And he goes on, and then he says this: at length the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of day.
Mhm.
That process, and there's a lot more to it, that process is the process of how emotional learning creates the ego self.
Mhm.
Or I call it the adaptive self,
Mhm.
rather than ego, which tends to have a negative connotation. It's an adaptive self. The child has to adapt. Those adaptations become, for most of us, all of us to some degree, maladaptive. Symptoms, problems later. Memory consolidation enables us to go back and actually change those learnings at the synaptic level in the brain, which is enduring transformation, not temporary problem resolution or insight. I could not be talking to you right now, Michael, if I had not experienced that firsthand and not continued to experience. I would not be talking with you,
Mhm.
because the
Yeah.
book would not have been written.
No,
Was
it's
it?
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's that you can tell in the passion that you bring to just talking about it, and with bringing in that profound poetry. It makes so much sense. It's really a beautiful thing. And I think I especially love this idea of turning the label of a flaw into a protection. So that radical reframing for things like imposter syndrome or people
Yes.
pleasing,
Yeah.
avoidance, that those aren't flaws, but they're more like
They're not.
protective adaptations or maladaptations, as you
Yes.
say. So that shift in just the description of the labeling, to me, it seems like it really changes. It sets the stage for that more emotional tone of healing, right?
One of the primary reasons that I wrote the book, because I know what it's like to criticize oneself. I hear my clients come down on themselves. What's wrong with me? And which just adds more levels of pain and suffering to what they're experiencing. It is not a character flaw. It is. It's an evolutionary. The brain is doing its job that it was designed to do. And it just doesn't need to do it anymore because it's doing it based on past history that doesn't exist. But the brain doesn't know that. It's just doing what it was created to do. And it's doing a very good job. That's why I call it the adaptive self. There's nothing wrong with us, except we've learned some things that no longer apply. And if we can update those things, maybe. It was interesting. Let me share one thing with you.
Please.
A couple of weeks ago, I was doing some research around emotional evolution, spiritual evolution, and cognitive evolution as measured by technology. And I drew a curve. Went back a lot. Obviously very subjective. I drew a curve, and we had the wheel, and then the printing press, and then around the 1900s and the 2000s. Oh my gosh, the technology curve was exponential.
Mm-hmm.
When I looked at emotional evolution in terms of how we evolved as a species, the line was literally flat.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see now, given the degree of war and violence and what's happening in the world, maybe even declining. And there's the spiritual evolution, that's a whole different one. And my concern is that the gap here and the gap here becomes so great that emotionally we cannot tolerate the technology, and it will I pray not, but it has the potential, obviously, to destroy us as a species unless we evolve emotionally. And to me, that means changing the way we think about childhood, the way we deal with changes, and really working with affect, working with our bodies, and not just our heads.
Yeah. That disconnect between the technological advancement and our emotional awareness, it strikes me that
Yeah.
almost by definition sets people up for an inherent sense of shame, as though there's something wrong with me because I don't seem, there's like a mismatch, a misalignment. A great friend of mine has used that term recently. And so I'm curious then, from your perspective, what happens when, say, we're able to identify that shame is a critical component that's has to be addressed. So what happens then when shame is identified and then kind of drops out of the system? That opens people up for healing, I imagine.
And shame oftentimes it plays such a significant role as a feeling in them because it's very toxic. The thing I ask people to think about is, okay, as a result of this shame, are you going to be abandoned? Are you going to be rejected, ostracized? Do you feel physical endangerment, betrayal, or engulfment? The 5 major threats that children experience, but they can't put a word on it. They can't put a word on it because they don't have the vocabulary. They just have it as an experience. So when shame is an emotion, the real threat is abandonment, rejection, physical endangerment, engulfment, somebody taking over my sense of being, which gets in the way of having close and intimate relationships, because the threat of that is I will lose myself, and betrayal. Those are hard for people to identify as what's going to happen to them. If you're a 44-year-old competent executive, but you can't really, you're not speaking up at meetings because you experience the threat of shame and inadequacy, and you will be rejected. That's powerful stuff. And it's very real. It's very, very real. So once the key thing is to really, what is the real threat here? What is the real threat if I do this? And that's hard for people because, oh yeah, okay, people reject me, big deal. It's not you that feels the rejection. You're feeling it based on this very painful experience that you had in the first 15 years of life that was ongoing. Yeah.
What's your sense of where the role? It strikes me that compassion has a critical role, not only in terms of from the therapist, but compassion for oneself. I'm just curious to know what more about the role, and maybe even some ideas about how that alters the neuroplasticity that you talked about before, that leads to enduring changes for the better.
My experience, Michael, has been personal and professional, has been that once you can understand, once I can understand, once somebody understand that what you've been doing to change is you've been countering evolution. You're kind of fighting the evolutionary bias of the brain, and the brain's going to win. That having compassion for that part of me that wants to protect me, my internal family system, like the firefighter or that wants to really protect me, but the role doesn't work in, but still having compassion for that part of me, and having compassion for the past. I know my own experience, once again, and with my clients, once they discover or uncover and realize what's really going on here, there's a lot of grief. Grief over lost choices, grief over mistakes, grief as a result of this maladaptive protective behavior. And with grief, the invitation for compassion. Oh, let me hold myself. Let me hold that part of me that learned this. Let me hold that part of me in love and in caring, not in anger, not in hurt, but and an appreciation for truly we're always doing our best given what we're conscious of. And if I can expand my consciousness, then I also enhance how I can be my best in the world. But people say you need to love yourself. I hear that a lot. Yeah, man, it's kind of like, dude, I get it. But how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do I feel love for myself? And I think compassion, my experience, compassion is the gateway, the path to that love for oneself.
Yeah.
I have to start with compassion for myself and go, oh, and then you enter the spiritual component of it too, which is another avenue, but it plays a part in there.
Yeah. It's really interesting to even think about the derivation of the word compassion, to suffer alongside. I think people often forget that. So it's suffering alongside of the self, the wounded self, as opposed to just trying, as you say, to put on a brave face or just try and love yourself. It's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah. It's like when people say let go, and like, yeah, I've been trying for 10 years. What do you mean? Because what I need to let go of is something I'm not conscious of that I learned, that is not letting go of the behavior, because the behavior is serving a function. It's letting go of what I learned that is causing the behavior.
Right.
And that's a different phenomenon. That's a whole different phenomenon. Yeah.
And so it makes me think that, and I'd like to maybe focus in more on your method and your book in particular, so I know that there's an importance to this, what you describe as the 5-step process, and that I understand that your idea is that it's not so much of a formula, but a self-informed and self-directed transformation, which I really love. I love that it builds in this sense of agency, which is super important, I think, for therapeutic purposes.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And so I guess maybe for viewers and listeners that might be somewhat skeptical after years of therapy or self-help of the kind that we're just alluding to here, what is it maybe that they should expect that's genuinely different about your approach, what you've learned, and what's in your book?
That's a great question. This is not about overcoming, doing battle with, fighting against, counteracting the problems and symptoms, including depression. Now, differentiating exogenous and endogenous depression, but for many, I've experienced depression, for example, as a secondary symptom to withdrawal. So it's kind of like an outcome of a withdrawal and avoidance process. And I've also experienced people where depression is their primary protective mechanism. Especially in older people over 50. Really seeing that depression is their primary protective. The adaptive self uses depression. That the challenge is we live in a society that wants to push through, wants to control it, wants to avoid it, wants to overcome it. If you look at advertisements, it's overcome this and battle through this. And this way of being, this way of transforming us is a totally different paradigm. You don't. You engage with. You go underneath the symptom to what is really, really going on. And the origin of that being that original emotional learning. The first step is being real clear. What do you want to be different for yourself in a positive sense? What's the problem? But what do you want to be different? Now, if you imagine that difference and expressing yourself, saying no, completing a workout program, losing 50 pounds. I've had people who they go on diets after about 6 months, they eat again, they go back to their old weight, because when they lose the weight, they become attractive. And to become attractive is to be seen. And there's to be seen. And that is very uncomfortable. It's terrifying to be seen because of what they learned about being seen. And so naturally, the brain is going to do its thing, and it's going to, these ways of really being clear. And then when you're clear about what you want to be different, then you will experience, as I want to write, for example, you will experience when you think about it, imagine it, in fact, I even suggest to people, once they've clarified the problem pattern and the very specific positive change thing, not the absence of a negative, and then discover it, they actually spend 1 or 2 or 3 weeks observing themselves in the world, experiencing this, to really ground it. And some people say, well, I don't want to, I don't want to strengthen it. I said, yeah, I understand. I don't want you to strengthen it. I want you to observe it. Look at, there it is. That way you can change the wording. Maybe you'll discover, oh, there's a lot more here. Maybe you'll make linkages to early caregiver experiences that you didn't have. And then once you've done that, you've observed it and you've validated it in your body. It's a emotional sensory evaluation. It's not here, it's here. Because that's where the action is. It's in the body. And once you've done that, then you can really look at, and I've got ways of people to really look at, how do you create prediction corrections? Information that corrects what you identified as the threat to you that you learned a long time ago, but feels like it's going to happen today because that's how the emotional brain works. Because it doesn't know time, it just knows now. Yeah. And then introducing to the brain, when you're in an activated state, that prediction correction information. And then observe, afterwards, observe what happens. But you have to be in it's that Bluetooth. You've got to be in that activated state in order to deconsolidate, for the network to deconsolidate. Once it's unwired, then new learning, the brain has recognized a mismatch, and it's going to do what it was designed to do, update itself, so it can be prepared for the future. Mm-hmm. It's such a human technology. It blows me away. And then also what's important, Michael, in the book I talk about this, is as you do this, you need to recognize the systems in which you function are going to, you're shifting everybody's relationship with you. Mm-hmm. And that's uncomfortable for people. They're used to you being a certain way, and all of a sudden you're not. So I have recommendations of how to deal with that and what communication skills you need to adapt to reinforce the transformation that you're making. That oftentimes gets left out of so many books. It's absolutely essential. The aftermath of the shift is really, really important in dealing with your experience and others' experience of you. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, that's very, very important. And I love the message, the hopeful message, just in terms of the adaptive nature of the brain, the neuroplastic changes that are possible, and that it really is. It's very optimistic and hopeful. So that's
it's so wonderful when Dr. Henderson when he was on and he talked about insufficient neuroplasticity. I suddenly realized, oh, memory reconsolidation is a process that is an outcome of creating sufficient neuroplasticity. Really, that's what it's, and I didn't realize that. And all of a sudden I saw it very clearly. It's, oh my gosh, that's what's happening. It's not activating and reinforcing, it's activating and deconsolidating so that neuroplasticity can now happen. It opens itself up. The learning can be updated. The symptom is no longer needed. The problem isn't needed anymore because the cause, the learning, has been updated. It's been updated.
Yeah. Absolutely fascinating. It's kind of like how even other kinds of treatment options like ketamine and different types of psychedelics
Mhm.
are kind of
Mhm.
known to enhance neuroplasticity and
Yeah.
make space for those sorts of therapeutic changes as well.
You bet. You bet. I have several clients that have done it. It was interesting that you were talking about he was talking about the viral infection. I had a client, a dentist, worked for a long time. He was on 5 medications. By the time it took about 18 months, 2 years of really intense doing this kind of work, this emotional learning and everything. And he was on half a boost bar. It was
Mhm.
just phenomenal change. But he still kept experiencing symptoms. It turned out he had Lyme's disease,
Oh, wow.
and had not been diagnosed, and it was causing. Now he's getting treatment for that, and that really reinforced for me what Dr. Henderson was talking about, is the importance of looking at other factors, viral and bacterial, that maybe is exacerbating the symptoms in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It is important just to make sure that you have a comprehensive kind of health plan with just making sure that you've had the lab workup and just everything's
Yeah.
been considered,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of potential for comorbidity, different problems contributing
The-
to emotional symptoms for sure.
Yeah, very definitely. And as a result of that experience, I have a much more what I would call comprehensive discussion about the symptom and the problem that I had in the past for that very reason. For that very
Yeah,
reason. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that's great. So I guess maybe as we kind of look to wrapping up here, I would be interested to know if you could, what would be from your extensive experience and all your thoughtful work and your writing on this, if there's one or two fundamental kinds of reorientations, one thing that you would hope that people finally stop blaming themselves for.
Mm,
And we've talked a bit about shame. It's such a broad
mhm,
term, but I was just curious, is
mhm.
there something in one or two kind of particular things that you would want to sort of leave us with as a hopeful message, one thing that
Mm.
people could, yeah.
That's a great question. And Michael, I think about Joseph Campbell's statement,
Mhm.
the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that, and I think what he meant, but certainly what I mean by that is, if we go within, and we all know sacred texts are full, that it's the essence is within,
Mhm.
the cave, if you will. Now, there are a lot of barriers there in terms of emotional learnings, a lot of discomfort. So going in underneath the symptom, using a variety of techniques to let the emotional brain speak its truth, which is not the truth, but it is an emotional truth that it learned, and not because our tendency to let this thinking brain get in the way. It's like, oh no, it's not that. Oh no. But it feels true. It
Yeah.
feels true. It felt true to me. And this is the thing that is so interesting that I want people to know. When you land upon an emotional learning, your thinking brain will judge it as irrational, as illogical. It makes no sense. I hear my clients say that often. That makes no sense. You're right. It does make no sense. But to your emotional brain, it does make sense. So understanding when you touch on these emotional learnings, they are going to feel true in the present moment. They're going
Mhm.
to feel true. And that's why they have so much power. But they feel true only because the emotional brain doesn't know time. And you do with your cognitive intellectual brain. Your thinking brain knows time. That if people can realize that really you will know you're in the cave. And that's where the treasure is when you discover these threats. If this happens, if I do this, if this, then this will happen to me. They're in the cave.
Mhm.
The treasure is waiting. It just needs to be illuminated by bringing in the prediction correction. That illuminates, opens up so that the brain can be updated.
Mhm.
It, that would be the primary messages. We have this beautiful brain of ours, but we're not our brains.
Mhm.
We do have brains, just like we have hearts and livers, but we're not our brains.
Mhm.
And we can therefore transform them in ways that are just beginning to become Oh, phenomenal. Just phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's just so lovely. I think thank you for bringing that amazing metaphor. I think we can wrap up by encouraging everyone to seek their own caves, to enter the cave, to explore and search for the treasure and find the treasure for sure.
Yeah.
Brian, this has been a deeply clarifying and inspiring conversation. What strikes me most is how your work reframes struggle, not as a weakness, but as the nervous system, the mind, the brain doing
Mm.
exactly what it learned to do, which was
Yeah.
to protect us, right?
Yeah. It's
So,
a no fault process
yeah,
that we can optimize. We can optimize the brain's learning, predicting, and adapting process for enduring transformation. The neuroscience is there. 5 steps really help it. We can do that.
yeah.
I know.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. No, I agree. I know also, from personal and from professional experience, it really resonates. And I think so for viewers and listeners who may have spent years managing symptoms, building coping strategies, or sometimes with some improvement, but maybe perhaps still feeling a bit frustrated that just
Right.
insight alone didn't translate into change. Hopefully our conversation can help them to look at opening a different door that you're proposing that's grounded in modern neuroscience, clinical humility, I would also add. And so, yeah, I'd encourage everyone to check out Brian's book, Living a Trigger-Free Life, for practical science-based framework that we've been discussing for understanding and updating these emotional learnings that may no longer serve us. So again, Brian, thank you so much for your courage, not only in things like questioning your own profession and for translating this complex neuroscience into accessible and relatable language, for sharing your personal story along the way. Really appreciated the conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity, and Happy New Year. This is just to begin to everyone in 2026, and may you flourish. May you all flourish. Yes.
That's great. Thanks again, Brian. And thank you to viewers and listeners for your interest and for your time. If this episode resonated with you, please do take a moment to reflect on, again, not so much what you need to fix, but what your mind and your brain may have learned a long time ago, and it's still trying to protect you from, and how you might want to, as Brian says, go seek to work with someone to go beneath that and learn, take some of what Brian's wisdom can offer in terms of helping you to flourish and move forward in this new year of 2026 with improved health and wellness. So again, thanks everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on the Neurostimulation Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Neurostimulation Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed that stimulating conversation with Brian Desroches as much as I did. If you found today's episode interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. It's the best way to make sure that you never miss an episode, and it also helps us to reach more curious minds like yours. If you think today's episode might resonate with a friend, a family member, or a colleague, please share it with them. Knowledge is better when it's shared, and you never know who might find this information helpful or inspiring. For more details about Brian's work, please do check out the links in the show notes below. You'll find everything that you need to dive deeper into this topic, to find out more about his books and how to purchase one or borrow one from the library. Join the conversation in the comment section or reach out on social media. If you have ideas for future episodes, please leave those ideas in the comment section. Your questions, ideas, and feedback make this podcast better. Finally, don't forget to tune into the next episode. It's going to be another exciting journey into the cutting edge of neuroscience, neurostimulation, interventional mental health, general health and wellness. So thanks again for listening. Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you next time on the Neurostimulation Podcast.